Welcome back to my channel. Y'all, this video has been requested for many months and I'm finally getting around to filming it for y'all. I have filmed this type of video in the past. I'm not exactly sure how long it's been, and there definitely may be some repeats, but because I keep getting asked over and over to film this video, I'm going to film it again and let you know my updated favorite makeup brushes. Now, while I feel like I don't have a ton of brushes in front of me, I do. I'm going to talk about many. I'm going to give you many options. There's going to be different options for creams and powders. There's going to be different options for larger face shapes and smaller face shapes. But when I look at what's on my desk right here, in comparison to what's on my vanity, it is a very small percentage. And what I have found is that I tend to reach for the same brushes over and over again, but I still love trying out new things. So I am going to be giving you different options as we go. I'm going to be doing both face and eyes. I could probably separate the two, but I'm going to put them all in one video, and I will put timestamps down in the description box if you want to check those out. So let's go ahead and jump into my favorite makeup brushes. Let's start out with complexion, and I'm going to kind of go in the order of how I apply my makeup so that I don't forget anything. The first thing I do when it comes to complexion is my under eye corrector. Sometimes I use my fingers, sometimes I use a sponge, sometimes I use a brush. And when I do use a brush, this is by far my favorite. This is from Fit Glow Beauty, and it is their Correct and Conceal brush. So this has two ends. It has a kind of a tapered into a V end, and then it's got a smaller conceal end. I typically use this end only. It fits up into the contours of your under eye perfectly, and it is what I've been using for well over a year for that step. So this is the Fit Glow Beauty Correct and Conceal brush. I do have discount codes for quite a few of these brushes. I will have everything linked and listed down below, so be sure and check that out before you go to purchase any of these. The next is foundation. I love a good foundation brush. I have a lot of them. I love a lot of them, but I made myself narrow it down to the two that I use the most, and they are both from IT Cosmetics. The first is the one I have used the longest. This is the number 7 Heavenly Luxe Complexion Perfection Dual-Ended Brush. So it has a foundation kabuki brush on one side, and it has a concealer brush on the other. I rarely use the concealer brush. However, I do have a few of these in my kit, and I use the concealer side on clients, and it works great. But the reason I love it is for the actual kabuki side. It is just the perfect density. It's the perfect size. I tend to stipple all of my foundations on versus buff, but this is great for both techniques. The size and shape of it works great for both. So I love this one and have used it the most. However, the one that I have been using the most lately, as far as the past 6 months at least, is the IT Brushes for Ulta Airbrush Complexion Perfection number 115 brush. Now, the reason I love this one so much is because I do prefer to stipple all of my foundations in, and the size and shape and slant of this is perfect for that technique. I don't know that I have another one that I like better for stippling on foundations. And when I mean stipple, I mean I'm basically stamping the foundation into my skin versus buffing it onto my skin. So this one is one that I absolutely adore, and you will see me using the most, especially lately. I know I have talked about loving other brushes. If I have talked about loving them, I still do. I just did not want this to be an hour long. So I tried to narrow it down. Now I use a sponge for concealer. So I thought, even though it's not technically a brush, it is definitely a tool. And it is by far my favorite. It's the only sponge I have been using for the past 2 years at least. And this is from e.l.f. and it is their e.l.f. Beauty Sponge. And it's the pink one. It's slanted. I love the slanted edge if I choose to use it for foundation. I love this pointed edge for concealer. I love the way it feels. It's soft enough, but not too soft. It gets to be the right size. It's just perfect for me. I love it more than any other sponge that I have tried. So it's the one I go back to the most. For powder, I have a few different options for powder. My longest used powder brush is the La Mer powder brush. I feel like I talk about this in every single one of my Sephora VIB recommendation sales because this is La Mer. It is expensive. But there's something about it that I absolutely just love. The size of it is perfect for me. I have a very long face, so I have more real estate to work with. And again, I stipple on my powder most of the time as well. And the density of this is perfect for that as well. So I just love this. It is also really good if you wanted to go in and use it as a buffing brush. I have done that before. I have a favorite that I'll talk about, but this, again, the density and the size works really well for that technique as well. Now, if you have a smaller face, you don't have as much real estate to work with as I do, but you still want that really good, like filtered, flawless powder application, I like the BK Beauty number 104 brush. This one is a little bit denser than the next BK Beauty brush I'm going to talk about, but it's smaller. So if you can see how much smaller it is, it has a smaller pinch at the ferrule, and the overall size is smaller than the La Mer. So you can still get that nice stipple effect, but you're not covering too much space. It's not going to be too big or overwhelming if you have a smaller face or want to do more targeted powder application. Now, if you have a very, say, pigmented powder or a powder that maybe you want to use, but you don't want it to be too powdery on the face, you want it to be much more filtered, and you kind of want your brush to do the finely milled aspect of a powder, then I suggest the BK Beauty 102 brush. So you can see it is much bigger than the 104, and it isn't as dense. It's much more fluffy, and it's going to just kind of fluff and filter that powder over your face perfectly without adding too much. So if you have one, I like to use this for powders that maybe have a tint to them, and I don't really want a ton of coverage or color added to my face. I really like this one with pressed powders as well. But if you have a more, matte loose powder or even a more luminous loose powder and you don't want a ton of the matte or a ton of the luminous, I like this one. Now, if you are someone who wants very targeted powder application, you don't like powder all over your face, you want something that's just going to be put in certain areas of your face, I like this one from Rephr. Now, you're going to find Rephr is one of my favorite brush companies. I do have a discount code with them. I love everything they make. I love the owner. They are a fabulous stand-up company. But this is the number 19 brush, and you can see it's much smaller. It's much more targeted. So if you're someone that likes to wear a lot of creams and you really just like to set in your T-zone, this is going to be a perfect brush for that because it just gets in the contours of your nose, your chin, above your lip, and in that, T area of your forehead perfectly. Now, the next step is setting my under eyes. I do this in a two-step process. I am a little extra and need 2 brushes for this step. And the first one is from BK Beauty, and it's actually an eye brush. It's the 201 brush. Now, I like to use this to go back in under my eyes and make sure that my concealer is completely buffed out. There are no creases, there's no sinking, there's nothing before I go in to set it with powder. The shape of this brush and the softness and the density is perfect for that. It's great also if you like to use a brush to apply your concealer. I really like this one as well. It diffuses the product out perfectly, but I use this every single day to go in and just make sure that that concealer has not settled before I go in and set it. Now, when I do choose to set it, I have a very favorite brush that I've used for years, and I hope you can still get it. I know he's doing like a refresh on a lot of his brushes, but this is the Wayne Goss number 2 brush. And it is just a very skinny, small, targeted brush. You can see when I put it up next to that Rephr, it's even smaller. So you could use this for targeted powder, but I like this one better. I just feel like it fits the contours better. But this one for under the eye, you will not find a softer brush in my opinion. It's very, very, very soft, but it does the job of setting your under eye without applying too much powder. It's perfect. Now, when I go in a lot of times halfway through the day, if I want to kind of touch up my concealer, I did a reel on Instagram a few posts back about how I like to touch up my concealer throughout the day if I feel like I need to. And this is the brush that I like to use for that, at least for applying more powder, and it's the BK Beauty 108. So another great option for setting under your eyes. I do find the Wayne Goss one is softer, a little bit more soft, but this is still soft. It's not harsh by any means, but it's that perfect size to just fit up under the eyes and apply the powder to set your concealer. Now, bronzer. I have just as many bronzer recommendations as I did powder. The rest is more streamlined, I promise. But there are a lot of different reasons that I personally feel like I need to choose different brushes on different days. A bronzer can be maybe not as pigmented. So I need a more dense brush to pick up the product and apply the actual amount that I want to get the color that I want. A bronzer can be a little bit too pigmented, so I need a fluffier brush to do that. I may want something to cover a larger area of my face because I want to look super bronze that day. And I may want something to be super diffused. So y'all, I have something for everything. Let's start out with the not so pigmented bronzers that I may need a little help picking up the product. This also is great for baked gelée formulas, and it is the Jenny Patinkin All Over Face Brush. Now, this is an all over face brush, but to me, you can see it's much smaller. It's one of the smallest ones I'm going to talk about in this category, but it is very densely packed. This could also easily be a foundation brush, but I love it for bronzer. One of the bronzers that comes to mind that I use this with almost every single time is my beloved Jane Iredale's So Bronze 1. It's a little bit of a harder texture and it doesn't have as much pigment. So I am gonna need something that really gets into that product and picks it up, and this is it. Love this for those types of bronzers. Another one that works really well for baked gelée, and I feel like it's the one that I pick up the most when I'm using those formulas. So for instance, my Chantecaille bronzers, I have a couple Bare Minerals bronzers that are baked gelée. Any of those kind of formulas, I really like to use my Osmosis large accent brush. This is a duo fiber brush and it is a little bit fluffier. It's definitely larger as well. So it's going to cover a bigger area of the face, but it's also going to diffuse the product as I apply it. So this also works for super pigmented bronzers to help kind of diffuse the color as I go along. But if you are a fan of duo fiber brushes, I really recommend this one. Or if you've never tried duo fiber brushes and you're not really sure how they make a difference, then I would give this one a try because it is so, so good. Now, if you're working with like a super pigmented bronzer, or I like to use this one with my loose powder bronzers, like my mineral bronzers, I like to use the Rephr number 5 brush. So this could be any kind of powder brush that you want. It could be blush, it could be bronzer, powder. I mean, you could even use it for highlight if you wanted. But I find that the size of this is perfect to pick up, it's natural hair, so it's going to pick up that loose powder really nicely and really buff it in. It's also a good option if you have a smaller face and you don't want bronzer all over. Like you feel like your bronzer brushes make you look more like you put bronzer on as a powder versus a bronzer. This might be a good option for you because it's clearly smaller and it's going to cover less area. Now, if you're someone like me and you want your whole face to be bronzed, then this is going to be the one for you. And it's probably my favorite of all of them. And it's the Rephr number 22. I use this a lot. If you are a fan of the original Tom Ford bronzer brush before they went all synthetic, this is very similar, but to me, it's even better. It's a little bit bigger in my opinion. If you're someone with a very small face, you don't like a lot of bronzer, you're not going to want to go for this. But this is the one that I use today and it just applies bronzer so beautifully. I can't say anything bad about this. I know a lot of y'all have purchased this since I have talked about it. It's hard for me to put this down and use other ones because it's just so good. So if you are a bronzer fanatic like myself and you don't have a super small face, you're not scared to really apply that bronzer, then this is the one you're going to want to go with. Blush. Real quick, I'm going to talk about a brush that I like for cream blushes, and this is the Royal & Langenickel Omnia BOM 185 brush. You can see it's been used. I used it yesterday for a cream. It's very, very dense. It could also be a foundation brush if you really like those densely packed foundation brushes, but I find that I can pick up the blush and just stamp it on my cheek just like this, and it applies it perfectly. I feel like the last time I tried to link this for something, it was hard for me to find, but I wanted to show it to you just so you could see the size and shape of what I prefer. And there's plenty of brands that have this, but this is what I love the most for cream blushes. Now, I'm not going to lie and say that I ever venture off of this one brush for blush because I don't. Unfortunately, you can only get it in a set, to my knowledge. The set also includes the buffing brush that I love, and I will link that as well, but this is well loved. It's the It Brushes for Ulta Soft Touch Blush Brush. And I don't know what to say about this other than I absolutely love it. I have been using it for years. You could probably go back 4 years ago on my channel and see that I was using this brush. I love it so much. It's just perfect for me and my face and my blush needs. Now, another one that I wanted to show you that I use a lot in my kit is the BK Beauty 107 brush. I love this. You can see it's slightly tapered there at the ferrule, and it's a pretty flat brush. So there's lots of ways you can use this brush, but I love to set it on its side and just pull it up the cheek for pretty perfect blush application. So I did want to mention that one as well. For highlight, again, I have one highlight brush. I do not deviate for highlight. If I'm using cream highlight, I use my fingers. If I'm using powder highlight, I use my Anastasia Beverly Hills A23 brush. It's just what I love. It works for me. It doesn't even have any writing on it anymore. I have only bought this one, but I have used it for years and years and years, and I love it. Highly recommend it. Don't use anything else. And then real quick for my buffing brush that you can also get in the set with the blush brush. This is the It Brushes 4 Ulta Blurring Powder Brush. Now, they have a blurring powder brush, I think, that you can get separately, but it is much bigger than this. In fact, it's twice as big as this. I own it somewhere. It is somewhere in my collection. I don't like it near as much for buffing as I do this one. You can use the La Mer brush, like I said, but this one is absolutely perfect for buffing, whether I use a powder to do so or whether I use it just plain and go in after my makeup and really buff. Make sure there's no harsh lines. It's just so incredibly good. Honestly, I don't use any other brushes for that, and I haven't ever since I've had this set. The only other thing left to talk about for face is not a brush, but a tool. This is my favorite touch-up tool. I have talked about this many, many, many times. This is the Jane Iredale Flocked Sponge. I keep one in my purse. I have 2 or 3 on my vanity. I have many in my kits. They are very affordable. And I basically, if I need to touch up, will either put no powder on this, no product at all, because it really does soak up any shine, or apply some powder and just gently tap it over the areas where I want to touch up, and it does wonders. I don't feel like it's talked about enough, so I wanted to mention that because it is something I use daily. Let's get into eyes. I promise I'm not going to take forever on this. I have very standard eye routine, right? I do a crease color, I'll do a lid color, maybe an outer V color, maybe an eyeliner, a little bit of smoked underneath, maybe some in the inner corner, and then I'm good to go. So those are the areas that I'm going to touch today. Again, if I have talked about eye brushes that I love in the past, it hasn't changed. These are just the ones I find myself reaching for most often. Something that has not changed in years upon years, and y'all, this is the exact same one. In fact, I think it actually broke and I ended up super gluing it back together versus buying a new one because I just love it so much. It has no writing left on it, but it is the Anastasia Beverly Hills No. 12 Brow Brush. It's just my favorite. It's the perfect size. This is the 7B. So you can see the 7B on right here is a little bit bigger than the No. 12. I much prefer the No. 12 for my brows. It's the perfect size to turn on its side and be able to, you know, put a little bit in the inner corner. It works for every area. And if you know, I got to draw on my brows every day. So that's my favorite by far. Okay, let's talk about crease brushes. I feel like this is my biggest category of eye makeup. I do have 5 options for this one, but again, it depends on maybe what color you're using, what size eyes you have. I wanted to give you lots of options. Probably my favorite crease brush of all time that I use the most is the Rephr No. 15 brush. You have likely seen me use this many, many times, but it is just the perfect size for me and my eyes to really get a blown out transition shade. This is not going to be something that's going to be super detailed. I mean, this is when I just want to lay down a color and really blow it out. I can even use it all over my lid if I wanted to just use one color as a wash. I use it all the time. I have probably 5 of these. Another favorite is the Wayne Goss No. 3 brush. This is much less dense and it's a little bit softer than the Rephr, but it gives that same kind of blown out effect. And before I discovered Rephr, this is probably the one that I use the most. I just like how it lays down product, and the softness really buffs everything out, makes it look filtered and gorgeous. So those are my 2 favorite, most used crease brushes. But if I'm wanting something, maybe I lay down that transition shade and I want to put down another color in my crease, but I don't want it to cover up what I just put down, and I want something a little more detailed, these are the ones that I'm going to go for. Now, Any of these are gonna work if you have smaller eyes as an actual transition shade crease brush. The first is the BK Beauty 202. So this one, if you can see, is a little bit more pinched at the ferrule. So it's going to make the brush a little bit more cinched in, and it's not going to spread as much when you put pressure on the eye. So it's going to be a little bit more targeted to the crease versus, you know, the last two I talked about, they spread a little bit more. You know, they're not as pinched at the ferrule so that they cover a higher amount of space on your eye. I hope I'm making sense. But the 202 is great for that. Another one that's great for that is the Sonia G Crease Pro Brush. It is also much smaller and it's going to be more targeted. So I will use this very often if I want to lay down a second color. I rarely use this as my only crease brush because I just need more space covered for my eye shape, but it's great if you have smaller eyes or want that targeted crease application. And then another one is the Scott Barnes number 62. This is longer than the other two I just talked about, but you can see it's just as skinny, if not skinnier. So it's really gonna get into that actual crease and not really deviate from that. It's not going to put it up higher. It's not going to get it on your lid. It's a really, really, really good crease brush. Now, when I want to lay down something on the lid, if I'm not using my finger, like if I use a super shimmery color, a lot of times I'll use my finger, not a finger, not just some random one, but mine. And I don't typically use brushes for that. But if I'm using a matte color or if I maybe want to lay down just an initial layer of a shimmer color, these are the two I reach for the most. The BK Beauty 203 brush, can see it's very flat, which is what I want. I like a dense brush and I want it to be flat and I want it to be small enough to actually fit on that eyelid. If you are in that camp and you need something a little bit smaller, I really like the Rephr number 28. This is much smaller. It is very compact and it is really going to get into very small sections of either the inner corner or your eyelid. Really, really good. So those are the two that I love the most for lid color applications. Now, if we're working on the outer corner, I reach for one of these two. This is the one I used today, the Rephr number 1. This is kind of that standard outer V brush, right? It's a little bit more pinched at the ferrule. It's still fluffy. You could use this as a crease brush as well. It's kind of reminiscent of, I believe it's the MAC 210. Is that the brush that everybody used to use back in the day? It's reminiscent to that shape. And I love it because I can really just kind of lay down the outer corner and then bring it up a little bit and blend it out. Now, another one I love for this step, especially if you have issues with getting it in the right spot, is the BK Beauty 205 brush. The reason I love this one is because it is at an angle. So what I find works the best is I can truly just lay it down on that inner corner and it's going to put it exactly where I want it to be and stamp it. So put a little bit of pressure, pull it off, and then I can use another brush to blend it. I can use this brush to blend it, but that's gonna show me where the best placement is. So if you're someone that doesn't really know, or you have trouble, or you have smaller eyes, you really just need something to kind of put it where it's supposed to be for you, I would definitely look into this one. This probably comes as no surprise. My eyeliner choice is to use shadow. I rarely ever go for anything else. Occasionally I'll use one of the Chantecaille gel liners or something and buff it out if I want like a smoky look, but I really love to use eyeshadow as liner. And this Rephr number 29 brush is hands down the best liner brush I have ever used in my entire life. I sung its praises for weeks and months after I got it, and I have not stopped using it. It's so incredibly perfect for liner. It's dense enough, it's small enough, it just applies eyeshadow as liner flawlessly. You need this brush. For under the eyes, if you know, you know. If you don't, I'm gonna tell you, I don't do my eye makeup. Well, I don't want to put that general of a statement, but 99.9% of the time, if I'm doing eyeshadow, I am going to be buffing some sort of eyeshadow underneath my eyes as well. These two brushes are my favorite for that step. The Wayne Goss number 19, which again, I hope you can find this. I don't know if you can, but if you have it and you don't use it for this step, you need to get it out. If you can't find this, you don't have it, or if you're making a refer order, I would put the number 14 brush in your cart because it is very similar. But they are basically just tiny little buffing brushes. Now, if you have really small eyes, these are also gonna be great for targeted crease application. I know a lot of people say to use a pencil brush for this step. I like really getting that color down. I like to really smoke it out, and this is so perfect. They're both very soft. They apply it and blend it perfectly. I reach for one of these two every single day. And then finally, if I'm doing a little bit of a inner corner highlight, or I want to put a little bit of highlight on my brow bone, this Sephora number 18 brush is my favorite. Now, this is the old Sephora Pro. They have revamped their Sephora Pro line. I have not tried any of the newer ones. Some people say they're better, some people say they're worse. I'm not sure, but I believe they do still have a number 18, and I will link that below. But that's my favorite one to do this really detailed inner corners and brow bones. That is it. I know some people are gonna say I talk too fast. Some people are gonna say I talk too long. I tried to get all of my favorites in and make many explanations as to why I love them. If you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to ask down in the description box. I'm happy to help. I will link all the ones that I can. Hopefully I'll have enough space as far as characters in the description box to link all of these. And hopefully you found it helpful, especially to the ones who have been begging me to do this video for a very long time. So let me know if you have any questions. Let me know what your favorite brushes are down in the comment section below. Thank y'all so much for watching. Be sure and like and subscribe before you leave so you don't miss out on any future videos. I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, safe, and sane. And then most of all, you go out and have a very blessed day.